My name is L.J. Stambuk, and I'm the President and CEO of the World Affairs Council of Charlotte. I would like to welcome you all here today. We have a full house. Now, Mr. Ambassador Wittig and his wife, Madame Ambassador, had a hard time getting to Charlotte and leaving the bad weather they had where they were. And we're grateful they made it here. We did everything that we could to have the famous blue Carolina sky and sun for them. So please join me in giving a warm Charlotte welcome to Ambassador Wittig and Madam Wittig. Thank you. This trip was a long time coming. This is the second time we have an ambassador of Germany in the last 4 years. It just shows how connected we are with Germany. And we're delighted to have you here, Mr. Ambassador, Your Excellency, and Madam Ambassador. Now, let me use this podium moment here to introduce to you some people we have here today. Ambassador, and hold your applause. We're going to give the applause once I've mentioned all the names. Ambassador Michael Almond. We have here with us also Klaus Becker, Honorary Consul of Germany to North Carolina, and his lovely wife, Concha Becker. We have with us Claudio Carpana, Honorary Consul of Italy to North Carolina, and we have with us Chris Domini, Honorary Consul of the Republic of Hungary to North and South Carolina, as well as Wayne Cooper, Consul Honorario de Mexico, which means Honorary Consul of Mexico. Also with us, we have Bob Morgan, the president of the Charlotte Chamber of Commerce, and I'm sure you all read the Charlotte Business Journal. We have Kevin Pitts here, the publisher and editor of the Charlotte Business Journal. And finally, and most importantly, we have our sponsor, Bank of America, Linda Lee Stanley, Senior Vice President, Market Executive, Carolinas, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Bank of America. Thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate it. Now, we could not be doing this and all that the World Affairs Council is doing without our board members. They provide leadership. They provide everything that we do is under their auspices. So I would like to use this moment to ask all of them to stand for a moment and to thank them for being on the board of the World Affairs Council. Board members, please stand up. Thank you. Now, this event today, this wonderful event today is made possible by our sponsors. And again, let me introduce to you the presenting sponsor, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, and hold your applause. Envoy sponsors, Lufthansa and Elia Davis, and Natasha sponsors, Parker Poe Deloitte and Providence Day School. So thank you all for sponsoring this event. We'll mention you a couple of times today, and behind us we have all your banners. We're delighted to have you here today, and again, thank you for your generous sponsorship. Now, the future of Charlotte and the state and the country is here as well. We have the Central Piedmont Community College students, we have Charlotte Country Day School students, we have Charlotte Latin School students, we have Charlotte School of Law students, Catterberg High School, and Providence Day School. Thank you all for being here. We're delighted to have you here. Thank you for coming. I don't want to be too long, but I do need to mention to you that we have some amazing, amazing programs coming up. Visiting Charlotte on March 26th is Dr. George Friedman. He's the chairman of Stratfor, which is the major intelligence collecting gathering service in the country. We also have the ambassador of Ireland to the U.S., the new ambassador of Ireland to the U.S. coming on April 22nd. On May 14th, we have the president of Costa Rica. The president of Costa Rica coming to Charlotte as our guest. And then on May 15th, the very next day, we have the ambassador of Indonesia. Now, there are other programs, but these are the highlights of the upcoming programs. We hope you will join us. And it is my privilege and honor to introduce to you Congressman Pitteger. Congressman Pitteger.
Thank you, President Stambuk. And Millie Cox, congratulations to you, the new chair. What a remarkable role you have played for our community with our international relationships for the last 25 years, I know, with the World Affairs Council. So a real tribute to you as well, and the best of wishes to you on the role that you'll play in the coming year. Mr. Ambassador, wonderful to be with you again. You were kind enough to host us for dinner, a group of us for a discussion dinner just a few weeks ago. And we appreciate how gracious you were. Wonderful to be back here. You know, America and the world is going through very challenging times. And truly that we have no better alliance than we have with Germany. This is an important alliance, so much so that this last September, I hosted a briefing in Washington as chair of the Congressional Task Force on Terrorism and invited members of Parliament to come from throughout Europe, from 28 countries, but Germany sent the largest delegation. I think they had around 7 members who came to this discussion on how we make sure that we protect our privacies while we do everything that's necessary and appropriate to identify the work of those who seek to destroy our homeland and other concerns around the world. The meeting was successful as such that we're going to go back. We'll be in Berlin on May the 8th for a continue to this exchange and this dialogue to make sure that we can work together in a collaborative way to ensure the security and safety for our countries. You know the challenges that we face, and that's why this relationship is so important. And I would say also representing this district is an honor for me, and the enormous role that German companies play in our economy that we're most grateful for, and we count it a privilege to serve you here. So in that regard, I would like Mr. Ambassador to present to you a gift, a token of our esteem and our appreciation. If you could kindly come up for just a moment. Got a Carolina Panthers jacket for you.
Thank you, Congressman. I will take it off for the speech.
Thank you very much.
Used to you. Great pleasure. Linda Lee Stanley, Market Executive, North Carolina and South Carolina, Merrill Lynch, Bank of America. Linda.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for that warm welcome. We are thrilled to be here and thrilled that the ambassador and his lovely wife are here with us today. What a treat. Thank you, and we appreciate all of you taking time out of your day to be here with us. And all of us at Bank of America Merrill Lynch feel very connected to our friends in Germany. We have 200 employees, around 200 employees in Germany, and we have about 15,000 in Europe. And so it's very important to our business, and I was very glad to hear that the ambassador and his wife do business with Bank of America Merrill Lynch. So there you go. That's all I needed to hear. But it is my great pleasure to introduce the ambassador. We are, again, thrilled that you're here. And most recently, the ambassador served as the permanent representative of Germany to the United Nations. And there, he represented Germany on the Security Council. He joined the Foreign Service in 1982, and he served all over the world, including Madrid, New York. He served as a private secretary to the foreign minister. He's been the ambassador to Lebanon. He's been the ambassador to Cyprus, and he served on a special envoy from Germany for the Cyprus question. He's also been the Director General for the UN and Global Issues at the Foreign Office in Berlin. And I understand he still has a lovely home in Berlin. But before starting his career in the German Foreign Service, the ambassador studied history, political science, and law in Bonn and Canterbury and Oxford universities. He's written articles on history of ideas on foreign policy. And again, his lovely wife, who is also a writer and a journalist, is here with him today, so we welcome you. And they have 4 children that are all in the States, which is wonderful. I'm glad that they can be here with you. And we welcome you to Charlotte, North Carolina. Hope that you will spend time here. That jacket looks really good on you. I hope we got a really good picture of that. So please join me in welcoming the ambassador.
Thank you, Linda, for that lovely introduction. And I thank Congressman Pittenger for that great jacket, the Panther jacket, and I hope to be able to wear it 2016 for the Super Bowl. Members of the board of the World Affairs Council in Charlotte, President Cox, members of the Honorary Consular Corps, Honorary Consul Becker, thank you for bringing me here, ladies and gentlemen. And dear Mr. Stambok, I know you're not only the president, but also the good spirit of the World Affairs Council, and thank you for that invitation. I also want to thank my wife, who is with me, to hear yet another speech on top of all the lecturing that I do in the family. So I appreciate her presence here. I'm really delighted to be here with you. It's a pleasure and honor, and I'm pleased to see so many of you here. It's my first visit to Charlotte, the world premiere for me, and I hope to be able to come back very often. Ladies and gentlemen, 3 weeks ago, Chancellor Merkel concluded a very successful visit in Washington. And at the end of a 4-hour meeting with President Obama, in a joint press conference, President Obama started his statement with two very important things in this order. Germany's Soccer World Cup victory last July, and although it happened last year, we just can't be reminded of it too often, so we were pleased. And then the 25th year anniversary of German reunification. And indeed, last October, Germany celebrated the 25th anniversary of the fall of the wall. And this year, we are celebrating the 25th anniversary of German reunification. At these decisive moments in history, the United States stood at our side and helped us to make our dream of freedom and unity a reality. And we are, and we always will be deeply grateful for your help, for the help of the United States. I believe this was one of the finest hours of American statesmanship in the 20th century. Germany emerged from the Cold War order as a winner, politically speaking. Suddenly, we found ourselves surrounded only by friends, and you might not be aware that Germany is surrounded by 9 neighboring countries. However, economically, reunification turned out to be a huge challenge. In 1999, after years of economic hardship, Germany was called the sick man of Europe. Over the ensuing decade, Germany undertook some rather painful structural reforms with considerable success. Thus, in 2013, The Economist, the British newspaper, revised its view, and on its front page, it now declared Germany was Europe's reluctant hegemon. In 2014, Germany reached the top of the BBC annual country rating poll as the country with the most positive influence on the world. Now, this is quite a flattering view that people have of my country today, but the truth is, in 2015, also, now 25 years after reunification, Germany finds itself in a radically changed environment. Putin's annexation of the Crimea marked the end of the post-Cold War order. The European economic crisis has not yet been fully overcome. The Middle East is in flames, and with the murderous assaults in Paris and in Copenhagen, Islamist terrorism has come to the heart of Europe. So it seems our liberal international order is under severe pressure. And in the midst of this, Germany has been propelled into a leadership role which we have not expected. The foreign policy expert Walter Russell Mead describes Chancellor Merkel's challenge as follows, and I quote, "As she attempts to hold the European Union, the transatlantic alliance and the vision of a greater Europe, including Russia, together, Angela Merkel carries one of the most difficult portfolios of our time. End of quote. Ladies and gentlemen, what does this mean for transatlantic relations? Allow me to look at three major challenges facing Germany today. And the first one is Europe and the future of the European Union. The economic and financial crisis over the past 5 years has exposed a degree of fragility and even political fault lines within the European institutional architecture that we had deemed overcome. But the crisis is not over yet. Greece has dominated the headlines in the last weeks in Europe. At the end of February, the Eurogroup, that's the group of the countries that have the euro, of the Eurozone, decided to extend the European assistance program for Greece for another 4 months. The newly elected Greek government, in the end, accepted to continue to work with the three institutions, the main creditors that provide the main support for Greece, namely the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, the European Commission, and the European Central Bank. Greece also accepted to conclude the current program on the basis of the conditions in the current arrangement, while Eurogroup ministers agreed to make best use of a certain degree of flexibility. Only after a successful conclusion of the programs, new payments to Greece will be possible. The most important element at the moment is that the Greek government starts laying out and implementing the necessary reforms so as to build trust with its European and international partners. And we are hopeful that we can muster that challenge that Europe was going through at the height of that negotiations with Greece. As I've learned from this job right from the start, not only among Europeans, but also among Americans and Germans, views about how to manage that European economic and financial crisis have differed quite sharply at times. Some of the US experts and officials have reprimanded Germany of doing too little, too late in easing monetary and fiscal policy. The reason for this may be that Germany has insisted on a more difficult, but, as we see it, more sustainable path. We continue to believe that the crisis of excessive sovereign debt in some of the European member states and the lack of competitiveness, of economic competitiveness, can only be overcome through sustainable measures, not just a flash in the pan. And that is namely gradual fiscal consolidation, structural reform, structural economic reform, and also covering the labor markets, and targeted investments, public investments and private investments. Europe is clearly Germany's #1 policy priority, because Germany cannot be strong without a strong and competitive Europe. Therefore, we need a far-sighted approach. We're now witnessing that the often painful structural reforms in some of the EU countries that had to go through a crisis, and I name here Ireland, Portugal, and Spain, those reforms have been paying off over the past 2 years. Their economies are growing again. So I repeat, only the combination of structural reforms, of fiscal rules, and targeted investments, as we see it, will preserve long-term trust in the Eurozone stability. Ladies and gentlemen, the discussion about Europe and its economy is inextricably linked to its neighborhood. And this is the second transatlantic challenge that I would like to discuss with you, the future of our relationship with Russia. The crisis in Ukraine has meant a paradigm shift in the East-West relations. It seems old-style geopolitics is back. Russia, so it seems, has become a revisionist power, bent on undoing the post-Cold War European order. It has taken a while for us to realize that the partnership that we had come to take for granted is gone, maybe for quite some time. And the Ukraine crisis has propelled Germany into a leadership role that we had not expected and that we had not sought. President Putin has turned unpredictability into a signature of his policy. That gives him a certain tactical advantage. Yet our approach in the Ukraine crisis has been quite consistent from the start. I would describe it as a four-pronged approach. First, we think it's crucial to support the Ukraine and those countries in the so-called gray zone between Russia and the European Union who desire it. And that will no doubt require massive financial resources. But in economically and politically strong Ukraine is the surest guarantee that the crisis does not swell into an incalculable conflagration. And this is why Kiev needs our help. Our help also means the help of the United States. A weak Ukraine is an easy catch for Russia. And of course, we, you, and also the institutions like the IMF expect something in return from Ukraine. And we want a compact aid in return of sustainable reforms which Ukraine badly needs. The second pillar of our approach consists of putting pressure on Russia through sanctions and to increase the costs of its course of action. If you look at the economic situation in Russia at the moment, the exodus of Russian capital, the ruble exchange rate, the slowdown in growth, one can safely say that the European and the US sanctions have had a significant impact, of course compounded by the plummeting oil price. And if I may say, I have rarely ever seen the US and Germany working together that closely and that trustfully as in the Ukraine crisis when we together drafted that sanctions regime against Russia. And I cannot stress enough how important that Western unity is, the unity of NATO, the unity of Europe and the US, the unity of the German and the US approach in this crisis. The third pillar is to reassure our Eastern partners in NATO. The Article 5 commitment of the NATO treaty is more valid than it has ever been since the end of the Cold War. A broad set of measures were taken, beefing up the multinational core northeast in Poland, setting up a very high-ready joint task force, reinforcing the air policing around the Baltic and Polish territories, NATO maritime surveillance, expanding NATO exercises in the eastern part of Europe. And Germany has been a very active partner in all those measures to beef up NATO, if I may say so. The fourth pillar of this strategy, or let's call it approach, is, yes, we need a dialogue with the Russian leadership. We need to keep the lines of communication open in order to try to engage Russia to take a more constructive role in the Ukraine crisis, in resolving the Ukraine crisis, but also on a number of important global and regional issues where we want to cooperate with Russia. And I just remind you of the extremely important Iran issue, where in that framework of the 5+1 configuration we are negotiating together with Russia on containing that crisis and agreeing with Iran on a sustainable, verifiable deal. And in that negotiation, Russia has indeed played a rather constructive role. So we need and we want the cooperation with Russia at certain international and regional crises. And let me say once again, for the record, we are not cozying up to Russia by engaging in a dialogue. Russia has no doubt challenged the fundamentals of the existing European and transatlantic order. It has annexed the Crimea. It has violated borders and interfered in the rights of countries to choose their own alliances. This is unacceptable at its core. But sanctions are a tool. They are not an end in itself. It's not in our interest to create an isolated fortress Russia in our neighborhood, a Russia with a further declining economy that turns its back on the international economic system, becoming even more nationalistic and inward-looking, a Russia that rallies other countries behind an anti-Western agenda. None of that is in our interest. That's why we need to continue to talk to Putin, and the Chancellor Merkel is doing that, firmly, candidly, with open and clear eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, a month ago, Chancellor Merkel, together with the French President Hollande, embarked on a, I would say, unprecedented shuttle diplomacy that culminated in a summit at Minsk, bringing together the leaders of Ukraine, Russia, France, and Germany. And after a night of tough negotiations, I think they lasted 17 hours, often on the brink of failure, Chancellor Merkel and President Hollande hammered out two documents. The first provided for a package of measures for the implementation of the Minsk agreements of last fall. And the second was a political declaration by the leaders of Ukraine, Russia, Germany, and France, supporting this package of measures, which, and this is important, reaffirms the full respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine and their firm commitment to a peaceful resolution of the conflict. Now, critics will say, this is all very nice, but it's nothing more than a piece of paper. And maybe they are right. It is just a glimmer of hope, and the proof is in the pudding. But we now have a document signed by the Russian president, and we will insist on the implementation. And shortly afterwards, the UN Security Council unanimously backed the agreements reached at Minsk. And let me stress, at Minsk, Chancellor Merkel did not act simply as honest broker between the parties to the conflict. They, the Chancellor and President Hollande, they negotiated in order to restore the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Ukraine. If we look at what lies ahead, much will depend on the implementation of these measures. Can we be certain that they will be implemented? Of course not. Since the agreement entered into force, there have been at least some positive developments. The ceasefire has held in large areas of the conflict zone, and the parties have begun to withdraw heavy weaponry from the front line. The number of casualties decreased substantially. However, we've also experienced major setbacks. Pro-Russian forces have violated the ceasefire and took over a strategically important railway hub. This was a clear breach of the Minsk agreement just negotiated. Now, one issue under discussion is the question whether to supply Ukraine with military aid. Germany is not making a moral argument here. It goes without saying that a country attacked on its own territory has the right to self-defense, and others have the right to support that country. But we believe that the story does not end here, and we have to weigh our options very carefully. What remains of the essence is that we keep our European and transatlantic unity strong and stand firmly by the principles and values that unite us. And the intensive and comprehensive cooperation between Germany and the United States plays, of course, a central role within a united alliance. Chancellor Merkel's visit to Washington a month ago showed that clearly once again. And I'm sure that many, including some in the Kremlin, were surprised by that unity. Ladies and gentlemen, the unexpected Russian assault on the post-Cold War order has led to a reassessment of the Atlantic Alliance. Some have even called it a renaissance of the Atlantic Alliance. But what I would call the transatlantic challenge, and this is my final point, goes beyond Russia. There's no major international crisis where we do not seek close cooperation and partnership with America. From Afghanistan to our common goal to defeat the terror threat of ISIL, we work closely together. ISIL is only one example of a worrying trend we are observing. We are witnessing a threat to the liberal international order that we have known. This order is under siege, be it in the Middle East, be it in parts of Asia, or in parts of Africa. Maintaining the principles of the liberal world order is in both our national interests. After the experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan, we know that this war-weary country, the United States, is engaged in a debate about whether, how, and where America should and must engage in the world. In case you're interested in Germany's response, and after all, you invited the German ambassador here, my answer is clear. American leadership is still absolutely indispensable. Take the fight against ISIL. I believe no other country would have been able in such a short time to bring together such a large coalition of nations to fight this threat. As for Germany, my country is one of the world's most interwoven and interconnected major economies. So Germany would have much to lose from a crumbling liberal international order. Ladies and gentlemen, an important building block of our shared liberal order, in my view, is the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, called briefly TTIP. We should all invest more in transatlantic cohesion. TTIP could be the new global gold standard. Last month at the World Economic Forum Davos, Chancellor Merkel stressed once again, the agreement is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to achieve more economic growth by lowering barriers to transatlantic trade. But TTIP is also a political and strategic project. Do we want our high standards, for example, on consumer and our environmental and labor protection to become universally valid, or do we want to leave that effort to others? I think the answer is clear. We want to shape globalization, and for that we need TTIP and a very important trade agreement. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a long list of other projects and areas where we need strong ties across the Atlantic. I do not seek to put them all into my speech today, but I'm very happy to discuss some of the issues with you, and I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I'm Mike Hawley on the board of the World Affairs Council, and the ambassador has graciously agreed to take some questions. We've got a microphone here in the center of the room, and so I would ask that you queue up, and I'm sure there are several of you that have questions, so please do that. While that's happening, let me just take a minute of shameless promotion for the World Affairs Council. As hopefully all of you in the room know, this is a spectacular organization. If you're not part of it, we really would encourage you to become a member. We've got some terrific events, as Lubomir has outlined to you earlier. And we'd love to see 225, 250 people at all of our events. So with that, the first question.
Mr. Ambassador, my name is, can you hear me? My name is Haywood Rankin, former American diplomat. Thank you very much for a very frank and honest presentation. We often get ambassadors here, and it's very nice for Charlotte, but we rarely get one who is as honest and frank as you have been today. So thank you very, very much for that. Frederick the Great apparently once said, and I happen to agree with this, that diplomacy that is not backed up by military might is pretty ineffective. And hope is also not much of a diplomatic strategy when it involves somebody like Vladimir Putin. Do you, Mr. Ambassador, expect that Europe, and Germany specifically, will begin to do more in the military sphere, or will they continue to depend on the United States? And do you think that the German public, which has been traditionally somewhat pacifist and also anti-American, may be brought behind a change in that sphere?
Do you want me
Please.
to answer it directly?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, may I say, dear colleague, thank you for your interesting question. And thank you for quoting Frederick II, indeed a great Prussian king, and I agree with him. Diplomacy and military power have to correlate to each other. You said Germany is a slightly pacifist and anti-American country. With the anti-Americanism, I beg to disagree with you. With a pacifist tradition, yes, that's true. That's part of our, let's say, historical baggage. And I wonder whether our neighbors want to see us more bellicose. I doubt. I think they're pretty happy that we have become a pacifist country. But I understand the background of your question. And indeed, we are, I would say, after this Ukraine crisis, the annexation of the Crimea, in a kind of a new mission for NATO. And we are all called upon not only to beef up our presence in the eastern rim of NATO, but to think about devoting more resources to defense and modernizing our defense posture, and also maybe modernizing our strategy. We are used to all kinds of traditional security threats. We have sort of forgotten that there is such a thing as hybrid warfare, which is using different tools. And some people say Russia is engaging in a hybrid warfare. So I think NATO and the Western Alliance has to rethink a lot of its strategy and a lot of its toolbox. As far as the German public is concerned, I would leave you with one or two thoughts. First of all, geography. Russia is our neighbor and will be our giant neighbor for the rest of the days. Between the US and Russia, there's an ocean. So that is a different setup. We, as I said in my remarks, we cannot live in peace with a Russia that is nationalistic, that has cut itself off the international system, the international order, that is not part of the international economic system. That would be sort of a permanent threat to us. So our perspective might be slightly different from, some voices in the US that think the only way to counter Putin is to show strength. Yes, two things. Show strength, show that we stand behind NATO's mission, but at the same time try to engage as much as we can Russia, Russian leadership, or the Russian society.
Mr. Ambassador, you'll notice that we've got a number of students here of all ages and stages, and they're queued up, and they ask very tough questions, so I apologize in advance if they stump you. But our first one is coming up.
I try to be fearless.
Good afternoon. I'm a high school junior from Charlotte Country Day School. And I have it's probably not a difficult question. Can you just compare and contrast the educational system in your country and here in the United States? Especially you have almost free education and higher ranking. So how do you make that balance off? Like, but there's no such a free lunch. Thank you.
I must apologize. Could you? I didn't get the first acoustically. The first part of your question.
I think he'd like you to compare and contrast the education system in Germany to the one here,
yeah.
maybe at his age, if you can remember back that far.
Okay. Well, good question. I think in terms of excellence, nobody beats the U.S. top universities, and we are a little jealous of the excellent American university institutions. On a middle level, I think Germany does better. We have a broad-based, solid high school and university education, and that is also important for an economy. So that would be my answer in a nutshell. Great universities and schools in the field of the top-notch excellence, and great strength in Germany. So the middle ground. But I have 4 kids. 3 of them go to American schools. So I have, I guess, the best of the 2 worlds right now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Please.
I'm Grazia Walker, and I'm from Milano, Italy.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm from Milano, Italy, and I know, and you're correct, that the sanctions worked very well in Russia. However, Italy is suffering quite a bit because they were exporting greatly. I wonder if it is the same in Germany.
Yes, thank you. Well, welcome as a fellow European. Thank you for your question. Yes, it's the effects of the sanctions. They have hit both ways. They have hit Russia, and they have hit our business. And give you an example, in the case of Germany, we have 3,000 companies heavily invested in Russia with FDI, foreign direct investment. And of course, they have taken a hit in their business. But there's a political consensus in Germany, and I guess that also covers Italy, that it was necessary to react against such a blatant violation of the international law, increasing the costs for the disregard of international law and the principles of the European political order. If we would not have reacted with our tools at that time, the sanctions tool, worse things could have happened. So I think most of us, in the case of Germany, the public opinion and the business world stands behind the political leadership for their sanctions policy.
Thank you, Mr.
you.
Ambassador.
Please.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for being here. You briefly mentioned some of the terror attacks that have occurred in Europe recently, and I was wondering if you had any thoughts on some of the anti-Islam sentiment that has risen lately in Europe as a result of this. For example, the Pegida movement that has spread from Germany to Great Britain.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's an interesting question. Indeed, I think Islam in my country and in Europe, and there are differences between the various countries in Europe, is a relatively new phenomenon. I give you a number. Germany now has about 4 million citizens or residents of Muslim faith. It's about 5%. Just in comparison, in the US, it's 0.6%. So in our case, it's 5% Muslim citizens or residents. That's quite a lot. And it happened in a very short period of time. We have become an immigration country. 20% of our population now has an immigration background. And we used to be sort of the ethnically most homogeneous country in Europe. So with the developments of the last decades, things have changed dramatically. And there are some people who are not catching up. And sometimes they are sort of the losers of, let's say, the economic development, the losers of globalization. So many people just don't know a lot of Islam and perceive the Islam as a threat because they associate Islam to the Islamist terrorism. And I think that's part of the reason for this movement, Pegida, who rose quickly up in Eastern Germany in one city, basically, but is now sort of dying down again. You will see those phenomena in many European countries because the influx of refugees, mainly of immigrants from Muslim countries, has happened very, very swiftly, and I think some parts of the population have to catch up and have to get used to that.
I'm Nancy Garrett from Charlotte Country Day School. Just recently, Speaker of the House John Boehner led several members of the House in asking President Obama to send arms and supplies to fight the Russian presence in the Ukraine. Do you or does Germany believe that that is an effective and viable plan to resolve that issue?
Thank you. Great question, because that is a very hot topic in Washington and within the alliance. I think there is a moral dimension to this issue. I think, as I said in my remarks, every country has a moral right to defend itself when it's attacked and when its borders are violated, and also others can assist that country in defending itself. So it's not, in my view, it's not only a moral question, and the moral position is clear. But I think we have to think very carefully about the effects of arming with US or Western equipment the Ukraine army. First of all, the Ukraine army, sadly, is not in a very strong position. Now, would that deter Putin if we deliver lethal defensive weapons from any action that he has in mind? Probably not. The question is, secondly, will that be used gratefully by Putin as a pretext, as a trigger to double down? Will he then say, now this is a game changer, the US or Britain or Germany, they are delivering arms, now they are waging war against us? That would certainly not go without a response by Russia. Now, next question is, are we willing to follow a military logic that might then be unchained? And how far are we willing to follow that military logic about the eastern Ukraine? It's not a NATO country. It's clear with a NATO country we have an Article 5 commitment, but it would be about eastern Ukraine. Are we ready to then, go further in that military escalation? My plea is, before you take such a decision, be aware of all the consequences that entails. And I'm not so sure whether we are clear about all those consequences.
Mr. Ambassador, my name is John Gallus. I publish a magazine here in town, and I'm part of a group that's been organized that calls itself the Global Vision Leaders Group. Besides our great Chamber of Commerce, a number of business people have come together to try to move Charlotte in the direction of becoming a global hub of international commerce. And we think the foundation we have with German businesses in this community is especially important. I have a request. One of the adjunct activities of this group is to stimulate greater interaction between Germany and the United States, and certainly with the Charlotte area. We'd like your assistance to invite your soccer teams, Bayern and Dortmund, to come and play in our Bank of America Stadium on one of the available dates. We think that might be great fun, but it also might stimulate a much more economic interaction in a very favorable way.
Well, thank you for your question. Consul Becker and I, we will work on that.
And if you'd like to commit right here at the stage, you may do that at any time. So thank you, John.
I'm Will Hunting. I'm from Providence Day. My question is, what is Germany's plans to counter ISIS attempts to recruit teens from other countries via social media and internet?
Yeah, very good question, because that's on everybody's mind almost in Europe. We are an active member of the anti-ISIL coalition. We have armed the Kurdish fighters, which for us was quite a unprecedented step. We delivered arms and equipment and training to a hot war zone in Kurdistan, which for us, given our pacifist tradition, was quite a step to take. But you mentioned something which is a new threat, the so-called foreign fighters, people from our countries, misguided, mostly young people, being recruited by the social media to fight for ISIL in Iraq or Syria. To give you a number, from our country, we estimate that around 600 people, residents or citizens of our country, went to those two countries to fight for ISIL. About 200 returned, about 80 died in the fight. And those 200 who returned are, of course, a threat. They're closely watched, they're closely monitored. And we just hope, with the help of the security organizations that we have, also with the help of the good partnership that our security services have with the American counterparts, that we can neutralize that threat. In other European countries, it's even worse. They have even higher numbers of youth. How do we respond? It's a very multifaceted approach that is needed. Sometimes they are sort of lone wolves, lonely young kids, mostly second-generation Muslim immigrants, somehow marginalized at their computer, and they feel that they have to fight for the jihadist cause. It's very difficult to detect those people. Sometimes they are part of a small jihadist cell somewhere in Germany. That's easier to monitor. So the profile is very different of those people who are enlisted, and the measures have to be targeted. I admit you can't, it's not only a law enforcement challenge, it's also a social challenge to try to integrate those kids that are sometimes marginalized in the society and keep them away from those people or institutions that potentially can radicalize them. It's probably one of the most serious challenges that we have in Europe. I would say, luckily, in Germany, it's not that dramatic, but if you look at France, there it is an even greater problem with all the radicalized Muslim youth of North Africa. Thank you for the question.
As you can imagine, we have several things for the ambassador to do this afternoon, and so unfortunately, if we can have one more quick question and maybe one quick answer, we'll wrap it up. Thank you for queuing up, and the ambassador will be around for a few minutes afterwards, but please.
Hi, I'm Sheridan Plunkett from Providence Day School. 70 years after the war, NATO is still in your country. How do German citizens feel about that, and do you think they'll ever pull out?
Well, thank you for that question. I would say one of the unwritten success stories of post-war German-American relations is the American troop presence in Germany. All generations of German soldiers and American soldiers and their families were posted and were stationed in Germany. Some of them for 9 or 10 years. Colin Powell is the most prominent one. He was serving, I think, twice or even 3 times in Germany. And the absence of tension, of aversion, or you can also say the sympathy, the mutual sympathy between the population and the American army or the American military force is something, I would say, fabulous, but at the same time surprising. The U.S. was an occupying power at the beginning of our post-war history, but it never developed into any kind of hostility, quite the contrary. Now, when American soldiers are now redeploying to some other European country, or if municipalities or communities are told that they lose American soldiers as part of their community, they protest. They say, we want them to stay, not only for economic reasons, that's part of it, but mostly because the American soldiers just belong to this town, to this community. And both have benefited so much of this partnership. So I'm sometimes think it's a great miracle that even 70 years after the war, it is a very healthy and friendly relationship between the German population and the American army, and I'm immensely grateful for that.
Thank you, Ambassador Wittig, and just a certificate of appreciation from the World Affairs Council. Thank you for coming to our city, and your lovely wife. Thank you so much. It was a joy to sit next to her at lunch, and we just certainly hope you'll come back to Charlotte. It's just a very easy drive from Washington, D.C., or a flight, so please hurry back. And I want to thank our key sponsors today, of course, Bank of America, and welcome to you all sitting at the Bank of America tables, and Linda and Rena, and Lufthansa, Elliott Davis, Parker Poe, Deloitte, and Providence Day School. Thank you, students, for coming. And I've met several of you who have said you've just moved to Charlotte. Well, this is the place to make new friends. This is the place to come to discuss ideas and exchange ideas and to deepen our understanding of some of the key issues. And the ambassador just said something about the American soldiers being part of the community. And I want to say that all the German companies here have greatly enriched Charlotte and are part of our community and have given back. As a native Charlottean, I can tell you that with the German presence, we have been greatly enriched. So thank you, everyone, for coming. And Klaus Becker, our honorary consul, who brought the ambassador here, thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.